All right, what's up, guys? What's going on? We are here today with Mike Ranfone. Mike is a fantastic trainer in this industry right here. And just so you know what we are going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about why mobility. Why are we working on mobility? How can we use mobility to improve um, your your pain? Right, get rid of your pain. Okay, free your body from this type of trauma, right? So we can continue to perform at a high level, okay, as long as we can, as far as we can. And I don't think a lot of people maybe understand this concept, but I'm here with Mike today. Again, one of the top fitness professionals in the world. And let's talk about Mike a little bit. Mike's got a gym in Hampton, Connecticut, right? Ranfone Training Systems trains a ton of athletes and adult clients out there. Ranfone Training Systems. Has worked with a lot of professional athletes. I remember I was there one time. Andrew Bailey, you were working with at that particular time. The pitcher, he was on the Red Sox at that time.
Yeah.
He is a functional range conditioning mobility specialist. We'll explain a little bit about that in a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. He's an ART guy, massage therapist. CSCS is one of the highest certifications in our training industry right here. The basic gist of it is the guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to performance, when it comes to mobility, and we're going to get into that today. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background and how we got to this point right here.
Yeah, of course. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the time. I always find it very humbling for anyone to want to talk to me. You know, it still sounds funny that someone wants my opinion on anything, but I guess I've been in the game long enough where someone's going to ask a question, right?
Sure,
So,
sure.
so for the last 20 years,
a humble guy. He gets a ton of questions and a ton of interview requests.
well, I try to answer the best I can, and that's
Sure.
that's my only guarantee is I'm going to do my best to answer or to tell you where to go find an answer. So I'm pretty transparent with that. Something I think the industry lacks a little bit. But my story is basically I've been in the industry for 20 years in some capacity. I did my first internship back in the 90s. Most of your listeners might not even been born then, but
Yeah, that's the
so
90s. Some people haven't even heard of that. What is that, the 90s?
it's one of the best times in contemporary history. But so I was like most people. I was very active. I played a lot of sports. Blah blah blah. You know, lifting, especially in the football culture, was one and the same. And the funny thing that I found is that the better I became at lifting, the worse I got at football, and a lot of that was through injury. So when I look back and I think about all the things that, you know, and we trained like morons, I'm not going to lie, like we benched, we squatted, we power cleaned, we did everything hard, we ran, we sprinted, we, you know, just stuff, you know, like we didn't have any organization, we didn't have any
Unless you're
principles.
moving some weights, right? Just
Yeah, I
move some
mean,
heavy
it's,
stuff
don't get me
around.
wrong, like I still think that's a you know, important part of the game. It's just how do you dose that kind of stuff in so that you optimize your training. And any good training, and I don't like to use the word functional, but it's purposeful. So the guy who comes to you and say wants to lose fat, wants a fat loss program, and the guy who wants to throw 95 miles an hour, you have to be very keen on dosing him with the correct amount of stress to elicit the response that they're paying you for. You know, it's not just about like what I do is what they're going to do. It's about what they need to do based on their physiological profile, their time constraints, their other responsibilities. Like we were just talking about how crazy my life is right now. So training had to take a back seat. And not to go down that rabbit hole, but basically it's not only what you want to do, it's what you need to do to guarantee the results that someone is coming to you for. So long story short, I got in the industry because I was very disappointed with what the information, what the coaching level was like back then. And I thought I could make a difference trying to be a little bit more holistic with the strength and conditioning approach. That's how I got into manual therapy, which you know, I still think is one of the best things I could have done as broadening my horizon, challenging my thought process, as well as adding another key feature to, you know, my service menu where I can then retain more clientele or offer something the next guy wasn't. And it wasn't just a marketing ploy. It was really, I thought it was what's best for the client. So soft tissue health is a big thing. And as you get older, especially when you have an extensive training age or medical history, soft tissue quality, health and well-being, feeling good becomes more of a priority than maybe how you look or how you perform, because it all becomes relative. And I don't think any high level of performance can happen without a certain level of health. So if you optimize someone's health and well-being, you're probably securing their future of performance. And that could be fat loss, it could be strength, it could be speed, it could be whatever. But not having that core value of health and well-being really becomes paramount to whatever the subsequent goals are.
Sure. So that's a good kind of lead off to what we'll chat about here. And in my opinion, just from my experience with working with people, also having the background of football player, 5 knee surgeries, this hurts, that hurts. All of a sudden you get to a certain age and you may have to adjust your training. You might have to start thinking about that. At some point, some stuff is going to start hurting. But in my opinion, you get kind of like two sides of things. Whereas you have the population who's never almost hurt anything. They're a little bit younger and they'll like drive right through these injuries, right through these problems. You can't convince them that maybe that's not a great idea, right? And then you have another side of things where you have these people who walk around with these injuries, these back problems, these knee problems, these shoulder problems that are bothering them, and they just kind of write it off as either I'm getting old, or this is just how it is, or like I can't say how many times I've heard the statement like, oh, my back just goes out every couple months. And I'm like, holy shit, like this is like, you don't realize how bad that is. So while we're talking mobility, we're going to talk a little bit about FRC today. Like, what would you tell to people, I guess, on those two sides of things? How can you use mobility in your experience? We talk about soft tissue. Some people may not understand what that is, like stuff that's connected to bones and joints, right? We need to loosen that stuff up so we can get mobile, right? Like, is there a way to one, kind of avoid the injuries, to reduce the injuries if you have them, as well as build longevity into your training, into your performance? Like, is there a way, or are you just stuck a certain way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that doing what's good for you and doing what you want to do has to be somehow dichotomous. Like, they have to be competing. And to a certain extent they will be, but it depends on what you're actually trying to achieve. I'd rather look at them as a strict complement to one another. So if you're feeling good, you could probably express your abilities better. And that might mean bench pressing without a sore shoulder. It might mean, how many times did you take a test when you were in college or high school and you had the flu? I mean, you'd probably prefer not having the flu while you had to take a final exam. So again, like, we can see this very strong relationship between feeling good and performing to your best. So if you look at all the qualities that you can develop in the human system, I think mobility really becomes front and center with that, because mobility allows you to express all these motor strategies or fitness qualities or performance measures a lot easier. So like when we're saying the cost of doing business, you have to put a lot of work into building up a 500-pound, squat or bench press or whatever, but the cost of doing business could be mitigated, but the result doesn't have to be. And again, it might actually lend itself to getting to that point because you're not putting the wear and tear on your body. So at the very least, you're building in longevity to the equation. And again, like you mentioned, the 25-year-old who seems like who thinks he's bulletproof and is just part of the game of feeling kind of dinged up here and there. What if you could maintain or even enhance those qualities into your 30s and 40s? Now, that also depends if you haven't changed your idea of what health and wellness is, but I just don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. It gets a little tricky trying to make sure that all of them are working together, but that's where having a good coach, a good trainer, a good therapist comes into play, because they can organize the phases or the goals in a sequential order so that you can keep moving through the continuum rather than hitting a roadblock where you hurt your shoulder, you decide to work through it, and now your shoulder is a full-blown orthopedic issue that needs surgery and 6 months of rehab. So if you said, hey, spend 20, 25 minutes a day or once a week doing these 3 things so that you don't have to take 6 months off, who wouldn't want to buy that one? And the way we look at training should really be more from an investment standpoint. I remember when organic became a big thing, I try to get people to eat organic and blah, 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 and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. Well, dude, you're driving a fucking Land Rover and you have a summer home. Like, how expensive is organic broccoli? Especially if it's going to make you feel good so that you can go to work more, be with your kids more, and just enjoy life better, So I think there's a lot of different things that we can look at from the health perspective, but mobility, I think, is one of the easiest ones that we can touch and program for so that people can do the things they want to do. Train hard, train heavy, whatever it may be. But show me a guy who's trains hard. His most miserable point in his life is when he can't train. So it's giving you the security and somewhat of the return on investment so you can continue to do what you want to do without that cost creeping up and then you have to pay.
Sure. So like the basics of it is, gentlemen, if stuff is starting to hurt and you're going to grind away at it, at some point it's going to stop you from training. And you're not going to be a happy individual because you'll be sitting on the sideline watching everybody else go. Right? So that being said, like, all right, you start to feel discomfort in a joint, in an area. What's the first thing you should do? Your average person, okay, I start to feel this. You know what? I'm going to keep rolling through it. What do you suggest to do, Mike?
Well, I think anytime that there is like literal discomfort or something that tells you something's off, you should stop and remove what those insulting or provoking things are in your routine. Again, that doesn't mean you can't train. Just get away from the things that bother you. I think that and usually when people finally make the call to their therapist or their doctor, it's already too late.
Yeah.
Because they've tried to get through it to the point where now they can't actually do it. So now they're trying to find advice. And what does the doctor usually say? Here, take some anti-inflammatories. Don't do that thing or lay off for 2 weeks.
Don't do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Just get out of the gym.
But we deal with injuries a lot because we deal with so many athletes. So our biggest part is let's not focus on what you can't do, but let's concentrate on the things that you can do so that you do still get a training effect, and while you're doing rehab or doing whatever it is for your shoulder or knee or back, you still feel productive because there is a psychology to this that you should feel like you're moving forward even if something isn't working well. But yeah, to your point, the first thing that people should do is remove the things that are bothering you. All right, get them at if bench press is blowing up your shoulder, maybe you have to floor press, maybe you have to dumbbell press. But you should also seek some kind of evaluation or assessment so that you know that thing won't turn into a full-blown orthopedic issue. So
laying on the surgery table, in other words.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
You want to make sure you know what's going on before you continue to mess around with this stuff.
Right. And especially I think what you see is this tremendous trend in therapeutic or physical medicine where you can find some really good therapists that will do everything in their power and knowledge and skill set to keep you off the operating table, where before it was do some of these remedial exercises. If that doesn't work, you might as well go under the knife. So I think there's a lot more options out there to explore, what potential mediums that you can actually utilize to get better. And most people, if they do it first, they don't need the surgery. But if they wait and keep going and years accumulate, and then now you have a chewed up shoulder or chewed up knee, and there's only one thing that they can do for you. So not allowing yourself to explore those options is probably the biggest detriment.
Sure. And your recommendation would be to avoid the surgery as long as possible, but in order to be able to do that, you gotta catch these things up front. Something's starting to nag you, starting to bother you. It's a clear indication that the particular movement pattern or the exercise is something that doesn't really belong in your routine for now, right? Now, until you get this thing to feel better. If you happen to luck out on your own and it just stops bothering you, then maybe you can go back to that, unless it starts bothering you again, right? Probably the best thing to do is find the right fitness professional, find the right orthopedist, the right physical therapist to be able to give you, here, this is exactly what you do, right? Like, here's what you should be doing, here's what you should not be doing. Do we agree that probably the wrong advice is just don't do anything? Do you find that happens a lot? I know it doesn't happen for you because you're connected to the right physical therapist that you're working with.
Yes. I mean, so we have a pretty good network of people that we vetted through the years. I mean, we've been around for a pretty long time. So we have in our network therapists and doctors that know what we do, believe in what we do. So if we send someone out and it might be just a precaution on our end because we're not sure, which is a fine thing to say as a coach or a trainer, is like, I don't know, you have a medical issue. I'm not a medical provider. You should go see someone. And if they give you the green light, come back. But if there's something that they can do with their skill set.
Just to be clear on that for the people out there, like, this is a high level fitness professional here who has enough education to be a physical therapist. I mean, you won't say that. I know you won't say that, but I'll say this guy, he's like a physical therapist, except he will not be a physical therapist. So if he finds someone with a painful joint and it concerns him, he's not going to try to work on something. He's going to send them to a physical therapist. So point here is for people out there, like, this is, again, it's a high-level fitness professional, and he won't even take that task on. So if you're feeling things that are bothering you, things that are painful, pain is an indication that something might be wrong, and the first thing you want to do is make sure that nothing is too wrong to where it's going to be a big problem if you keep pushing through it and you're not very sure. I just want to make that point very clear.
Yeah, 100%. And I honestly think that, from the business side, like, we deal in people's trust. You know what I mean? Like, if I got someone coming in and they say, hey, my shoulder hurts, and they said that a couple times and I do nothing about it, and that guy ends up blowing out his shoulder on my watch and then has to get surgery, like, what did I really do for him? Even if I'm concerned about him not, paying his membership fees or, my personal training rate, whatever, like, I've just now gotten rid of business for 6 months because he's got to go get surgery and rehab and so on and so forth. But if I send him to the right guy and that professional helps him, does that not make me look like, I'm not trying to be everything to everyone? Sure. And that's, like that can be defined as scope of practice or just knowing your limitations or staying in your lane, whatever you want to say. But it does lend itself to a better business model, because the worst case scenario is you look like a fool. And you could be a very smart, intelligent guy, but you go outside your lane, someone gets hurt on your watch, that's going to come back and bite you way more than you sending them out and the doctor saying, no, you're good to go. Like that, and that like restores confidence and trust and loyalty to you as, a business owner. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I don't know, you should see someone else. Like, we can't be masters in everything. I'd much rather be a master on the floor than a master in orthopedics. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
again, I can't overemphasize that point. This is one of the top fitness professionals on the planet. He can easily probably rehab with his eyes closed 9 out of 10 things that he sees. And the moment that he sees something painful or something that's not right, he's going to go, hey, just go check your physical therapist, go see an orthopedist, get that thing, screen, get an MRI, okay, make sure we know what we're dealing with before I start messing with you. And again, I just think a lot of people out there, they just don't take these signals serious enough. And again, it's coming from you. It's coming from a guy who's had 5 knee surgeries, and it continues to accumulate stuff as we kind of go here.
I mean, and if we looked at this, let's say you're a very good trainer or coach, and you were watching a guy squat, right? And you watch him squat, and it's flawless, right? So there's no technical breakdown, there's no mobility breakdown, but it hurts him. That almost says that's out of your wheelhouse right there. Like, if he's doing everything you asked him to do and it's still bothering him, it can only be something that lives outside your expertise, which is probably a medical issue. So you're way better off. There's no fix for that, Go send him somewhere else. Now, if there's a technical problem that you can resolve on the floor in real time, fix it. If there's a mobility problem, which you've discovered because you have a good screening process, or your evaluation takes you to that, and it's a mobility issue, then fix that. But if it's a medical issue, just get them out of your building, man. Send them to someone good. Another thing that you should do is have good people in your network that complement what you're trying to do. Like, I don't send them to orthopedic doctors who are going to keep them forever, or going to automatically prescribe surgery or physical therapy. They're going to go through their checklist and make sure everything that they're doing is just as good as what I'm trying to do, and hopefully that guy comes back to me, and at a good time when he's ready to come back to me.
Yeah.
So you can look at it however you want. It's best practice to do right by your client and get them in the place that they need. Set them up for success, and sometimes that means it's not with you.
Now, do you find and obviously you have just a great system at your place and you've been running it for a long time. You find that there are times where people don't understand that, they just don't get there. Like, Mike, I came to work out, now you're telling me to go to the doctor? What's going on here? Like, I'm good, Mike. Like,
yeah,
oh man, it's just that old bum shoulder. Do you find you run into that resistance, or
100%? And a lot of times, because we deal with kids. Kids are very reluctant to tell you something's wrong enough until it's unavoidable, right? So that's why we have to have conversations that contain some depth and some kind of context to tell them why we have to do this. So like, a lot of people come in and they want to do a fat loss challenge with us, and we say, hey, your ankle is really messed up. So here's what we recommend. Go see this person, blah, blah, blah. Go through their process. In the meantime, we'll train you as best we can under the acknowledged limitation that you have. So, and that will then set yourself up to put them in the right position. Maybe they can't squat, but they can, trap bar deadlift. Maybe they can't run, but they can get on the bike. So there's all these other ways of skinning that cat, to serve the quality that they're paying you for. So if they want fat loss, like, those are physiological things that we have to adhere to. Which, if they don't have an ankle, just remove the things that depend on that mobility or that motor strategy based off the ankle's performance. But you can still train them. So we're always, it's like it's a little bit of a give and take, obviously, but letting them know that we're here to serve them, and then we end up hurting them. I can't think of a worse, mark on your business. But again, if they don't believe in it, and you think they're going to be a liability to you, then you don't want them in your business anyways. You don't need that business. You don't want that business. So, and if they're not going to buy into you about their own health and well-being, are they really going to listen to you when, like, if their ankle's really messed up and they have to see a doctor and they say no? Like, good luck trying to get them to change their nutritional habits. Good luck to, them adhering to your training scheme. Like, those guys, that's a red flag to me. Yeah. Like, I don't want them. Yeah. So, again, if we sell it as we're doing this, our best interest is to serve your best interest, and you don't want it, then what could we possibly do in the long run? Like, that probably is not a person that's willing to invest in us. So I think it makes a lot of sense from a lot of different angles.
It's like a Bill Belichick thing. We're going to get this guy out of here. It doesn't fit the system. Yeah,
exactly, man. And that's what you find is, like, what are the key components to operating a good system? And some of that's buy-in. Like, people have to believe that they're in the right place and you're the guy, or you're the place, you're the business. So if we're not upfront with that honesty and transparency, or they're not accepting it, that relationship's not going to work.
Sure. Main point here is, folks, listen to your professionals, man. Don't come to a professional and not take the advice, and obviously make sure you find the right professional, and maybe that segues us into a little bit of, let's talk FRC, and let's talk how, we're talking a lot about injury, and maybe let's talk a little bit about FRC and how people can use that to nip this in the bud before it happens. Right?
Yeah, sure. So FRC, for those who don't know, it's a certification course based on the idea of what exactly constitutes mobility. Like, what are the constituents that have to go into having mobility? And mobility is one of those terms in our industry that's thrown around kind of ambiguously, or used synonymously with other terms like flexibility, range of motion, so on and so forth. And I don't care really what your definition is. It's just that show me how you have a set guide based on scientific research to approach many of the mobility issues that you may see. I don't think there's one out there that really addresses all the components, just like if you're trying to build any other quality. And I think FRC, to me, was the first one that really spoke about mobility as a quality that you can progress and regress and train. And I think you can attest to this, is that mobility training is hard. Like, it's not fun. It's actually very humbling, because maybe in essence, it is very localized strength training for your joints. So you can look at it like, if your shoulder doesn't move well, first of all, why does it move well? Move well for what? Can you wash your hair? Can you overhead press? Can you reach the top shelf? I don't know, but that's how you have to figure out what the mobility you have and what you're lacking to do the things that you want to do, and then building you a shoulder to do the things that you want. Because you can have a pro level, baseball pitcher who needs crazy amounts of mobility, as opposed to your, 55-year-old weekend warrior who really doesn't need all that much, but needs to have exactly the right amount to do the things that he wants to, so he doesn't get hurt. So FRC was the first course to really start to break down these elements of mobility from the joint and soft tissue level. So I thought it was a very provocative course, and I took it, now almost 6 years ago, and it's been one of those courses that really changed the way I thought about things, both strength and conditioning and manual therapy, and it's certainly been a great rabbit hole to dive into.
Sure. And kind of like, I guess, make a point on that, and maybe what a lot of people don't understand is, again, we want to get into the gym and we want to do these things, and I know CrossFit is a big thing right now.
Sure.
Races, mud races, Spartan races are a big thing, and it's like, ladies and gentlemen, every joint is multiple joints involved in any one given movement. I mean, you take we'll just say a regular snatch, which is popular in CrossFit right now. In order to be able to land in a deep squat and catch a barbell overhead with weights over your head, again, things that people are doing to be able to do a handstand walks, or you're going out on races and you're climbing monkey bars and stuff like that. Like, there are multiple joints involved in these movements, right? Or just running in general, sprinting, you're playing sports, you're playing basketball, whatever it is, multiple joints involved in these movements, and all of these joints need to be able to do what they were intended to do before you started getting old and stiff and not paying attention to it. And basically,
Sure.
what FRC is like, okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to try to either keep what we haven't made old and stiff already, or we're going to try to regain what we've lost in the process of not paying attention to being mobile, basically. And I think, like, that's a big thing. It's like, if everyone came out of high school when we were moving around a lot and playing sports, or college, whenever's the last time you were pretty active, whether, again, you were an athlete or you're just a kid running around, if you continue to use all your joints and continue to stay mobile, it's probably not a big issue, right? But as we start getting older and stop moving as much, these joints get stiffened up. Now we want to do all this stuff, right? We want to be active in whatever way that inspires you to stay fit,
and just not prepared to do it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people don't understand that. You just don't understand. You just think you're going to bowl right through that stuff, and every single one of these joints need to do what you needed to do. So FRC is like, okay, here's how you get it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, totally. And that's the cool thing, because, like, with all the multiple joints that you could be looking at in any given exercise, you might have an ankle on your right side that moves really well, and your ankle on the left side doesn't. So then there's two different things you have to do. It's not like this blanket cookie cutter approach to building out a quality. This doesn't come with like, oh, just do 3 sets of 10 and you'll be fine. Well, 3 sets of 10 might work on one side, but it might not work on the other. So how can you really kind of like distill a joint down to what it actually needs so that it moves according to how you want to move? So if you're a runner and you don't have a certain amount of dorsiflexion on one side, something's going to be doing the work. Something probably that's not intended to work like an ankle is moving like an ankle. So you're going to put that extra stress and wear and tear And at some point, you're going to find yourself in a therapist room, or an orthopedics room.
Sure.
So
that's basic. That's just running, which some people, they don't even stretch. They're just like, I'm just gonna. My warm up is, the first 5 minutes of the jog, right? Like, okay, and now the basically the shin bone has to move forward over the foot as we go, and dorsiflexion is that, like, okay, it gets stuck. So every time now you're taking thousands of steps, and what's supposed to be moving is not moving, and this is causing stress up the rest of the body, right? So
yeah, I think running is probably the premier example because, exercise comes in a lot of shapes and forms. Exercise can be free. You can spend $10 a month at a gym membership. You can spend $100 an hour at with a personal trainer, whatever. But running is something that everyone thinks they're allowed to do. I'm just going to buy a new pair of shoes and I'm just going to take up running, regardless of like whatever fitness level they're in. But if someone said that same exact idea as it pertains to, like, say, bench pressing or squatting, and they got shitty form, and every repetition they do looks like shit, we would assume that person's going to get hurt at some point, whether they're going to do too many reps, too much weight, or a combination of both. But we don't say the same thing or think about the same things as it pertains to running. So if your form sucks based on the lack of mobility, or you're just got shitty technique, which then makes mobility even worse, are we that surprised that so many runners experience lower limb pain? Like, it makes perfect sense because every step they take is a bad repetition. Sure. So if you do 10,000 steps over the course of a 5-mile race or a 5-mile run, you did 10,000 steps wrong. Yeah, if you did 10,000 reps of anything wrong, you probably assume you're going to get hurt. Sure. But running is just, we were born to run. Well, you unmade that possibility. So
is it possible? And again, there's a lot of people out there. I won't turn this into a yoga conversation, but I'll just say they might say, okay, I go to yoga and I'll get more flexible, or whether or not that works or not is, you have to test that, ladies and gentlemen. You have to actually figure out if the things you're doing to stretch are working. But is it possible? I've got type X.
Yep.
Y and Z, because it's probably multiple things, right? Is it possible to make those things change? And what does one have to do in order to be able to do it? We'll just say, like, using FRC, right?
Yeah, okay. So that's a really good question because, like, the term flexibility is usually confused with mobility, or they're at least used interchangeably. So there are two distinct differences. We won't get into the nuts and bolts of that, but let's just say that your hamstrings are tight. Or let's say this, your hamstrings don't allow you to do the thing that you want. And let's say that's deadlifting. So the first thing that we have to kind of identify is what's causing the restriction. And if you are looking at just the passive range of motion of the hip joint that is restricted by the hamstring, ideally, we would say, all right, well, is the hamstring really keeping the hip from expressing that movement? And what are the things that could be keeping it? Because we could have a joint pain, which means, like, as the hip flexes up, it runs into bone. So that's a problem that is really hard to fix with hands or exercises or whatever. That's probably an orthopedic issue because there's been a lot of years of accumulating the wrong type of stress. Okay?
Sure.
And again, I'm simplifying this. There's obviously a lot of different ways, but the first one is it bone on bone? Because that's a bad one. Now, the second way of seeing if there's a limitation is it maybe a capsular issue, which is the deepest layer of tissue in a joint. So that can lend itself to different kind of manual therapies or different treatment or exercise protocols. The third one is it literally the tissue is not long enough to make the excursion into hip flexion, which may be because you tore your hamstring when you were in high school and your hamstring tissue is now fibrotic, and that means that the tissue doesn't want to give, okay? And then the last one might be you feel tight, but the nervous system is the culprit, not anything else. So now we have 4 basic categories of what could be limiting your hamstring range of motion. Because if we're looking at range of motion as it pertains to a specific movement, we now can, like, dilute it down and distill it down to the 4 basic things. Is it bone? Is it capsule? Is it fibrotic tissue? Or is it some kind of neurological default mechanism going on? And each of those 4 has its own pathway or exercise or treatment protocol that will fix those things. Because you can't give let's say if it's a fibrotic issue, you can't give a capsular problem a fibrotic fix. You can't fix a bone-on-bone situation by any amount of yoga, any amount of exercise. That's probably, you got to go in there and shave it down or do whatever an orthopedist does, but that's not in our realm, that's not in our wheelhouse. So each one has its own special set of protocols that we have to adhere to because we didn't make the rules. That's just physiology and neurology. Sure. So like, if we keep in line with those physiology and neurological principles, then we will probably be way more successful treating that individual.
So the basic gist of it is, and this is kind of my opinion, is the average everyday person. Like, again, you're saying to yourself, oh, this is tight or this hurts and I gotta stretch some shit, right? But in reality, they're not you, they're not me, right? And if you don't have a real good professional around you, you have no fucking idea actually what you're supposed to do. And that's, in my opinion, the average person, like, again, they think, oh, okay, I got to stretch something or I got to do this, I got to move that. But the reality is without someone really smart, like a Mike Ranfone around you to be able to understand the physiology of your body and what you're going through, to be able to assess you, to be able to screen you and figure these things out for you, it's going to be challenging to know maybe what the right thing to do is. So how can these people use FRC, or where can they find FRC, right? So now they can make sure they find a professional like Mike, right? So they don't end up doing the wrong things that leave them in a worse place later on.
Yeah, so if you wanted to explore, like what FRC or an FRC provider can do, if you go to Functional Anatomy Seminars.com, there is a provider listing. So you would just go there, type in your zip code, and see who around you actually performs or was certified in FRC, so that you can get evaluated by them, and they can, make recommendations. And I don't want to relinquish or even diminish the ability of people being very keen or cognizant of their own bodies, right? Sure. If something feels wrong, if something feels off, I'm always gonna give that some credence. So if someone comes to me and they say, "Oh, my shoulder hurts when I do a certain move," I'm gonna believe them until proven otherwise. You know what I mean? So like if you're a casual gym goer and you think that you have tight hamstrings and you've been in yoga class 3 times a week for the last month and you still have tight hamstrings, it's probably not an issue that will be resolved through yoga. It is something that's underlying that you don't know about, and that's okay, but you just got to go find the right help for you. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And I would never say, don't listen to your body. I think there's too many times, because I could do every orthopedic test, everything that I know, and it still doesn't help you, which means it is outside my realm of knowledge or expertise or skill to help you. And that's, I think, at every level, no matter where you are in the professional continuum or even just the fitness enthusiast, that if something's still bothering you and persistent, go find someone who can actually help. And maybe the guy that is asked the most, or the person that's asked the most, is a personal trainer or a coach, because that trust relationship has been established through time. And it behooves us to get them in the right position or right place so that they can come back to us and we can train them like we know how. So there's a couple different things that obviously they can do just from a self-assessment. And most good FRC practitioners will prescribe daily kind of assessments, which we call CARS assessments. And you know this because you've taken the course. But one of the big indicators is what kind of pain are you feeling? So one of the huge self-screening mechanisms that FRC uses is what's called a closing angle pain. So I'll use my arm as an example. So if my arm is going into elbow flexion and I have pain on this side, that's usually something inherent of a very deep internal mechanism that needs medical assistance. if you have pain or discomfort on the other side, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it usually says that this tissue is the thing that's restricting you, which is a little easier fix. But I would still, if there is any kind of pain or like something that is concerning, just go see help. Go see someone, you know? But those are the two distinguishing factors of closing angle to open angle issues, which just lends itself to like being able to, oh man, I feel something. Let me do a real simple test. Oh, it's the closing angle pain. That probably means that I need some medical attention. So.
Sure. And just so people out there know, CARS, controlled articular rotations, right? So it's pretty much taking all of your joints through a full range of motion. And then, like as Mike is saying, as you take it through that range of motion, if you find that you have pain in that closed angle, that's a big kind of red flag for the practitioners. It immediately tells them, okay, this could potentially be a big issue, and then they're probably going to refer you out. Open angle on the opposite side, a little bit easier. And again, if this is somewhat complex to people out there, which we understand it is, I think the big point of a lot of this is. It's just understanding when the appropriate time to reach out to someone when you are feeling pain, when you are feeling discomfort, when you feel like you're tight, because there's people out there who just gonna understand, like Mike, the stuff we're talking about for the average gym goer out there. Again, you're gonna think, man, I gotta stretch some stuff. I'm tight. I gotta stretch some stuff. But you may just not know the nuances in a way that, again, a guy like Mike Ranfone knows, and these FRC practitioners know. So the minute you start to feel this discomfort, the minute you start to feel pain, the minute you start to feel something's up, look these guys up, and I'll put the link in the description below so you guys can kind of check it out. But if you want to continue to perform at a high level, I mean, these things are key. And again, these guys are so smart. They can pick up all this stuff, and you want to make sure that you're working with the right professional who points you in the right direction, so you can continue to do this stuff for as long as possible. It's really what it comes down to. It's about the longevity. You guys that are 25 years old out there, when you're 35, you're going to feel a little bit different. When you're 45, you're going to feel a little bit different. But if you jump on this stuff early, the longer you're going to be feeling as good as possible, right?
Yeah, and I think, like, you always, like, let's say every 10 years, like, your value system really changes a lot. Like, what you're concerned about, what you want to do, and that's in all facets of your life. But as it pertains to training, like, if you really want to keep benching and squatting and stuff like that, it really makes a lot of sense to invest in the joints, in the structures that are allowing you to do those things. And again, I think that's where FRC and a lot of other great commercial brands out there, commercial models out there, do a great job of ensuring that you can do the things that you want to do for as long as you want to do them, and as hard as that you want to do them. So your goals, your priorities might change. But I've never met anyone who said, "Man, I'm so mad that I took such good care of myself." Like getting out of bed in the morning after playing high school and college football and lifting for as many years. The guy who gets out of bed and has to like literally warm up just to get out of bed probably would have rather, if he knew better and had the choice and was given the exercises and the education to do the things to stave off that feeling of getting out of bed every morning feeling like shit. Like, show me the guy who doesn't want that, you know? And again, like if you work with general fitness people, general pop, like I think one of the best things you can give them is improved quality of life. Like at the end of the day, I mean, we work with a good amount of general fitness too. And, it's usually fat loss. Like that's what gets them in the door. But at some point, like maybe they think about, oh man, I want to just play with my kids. I want to be able to throw the ball in the backyard. Stuff like that you, as a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old, you probably don't, it's not even on your radar. But at least you'll have that option when you get to that point rather than trying to figure out, like a contingency plan to throw a baseball with your kid. So I think it just speaks a lot to just like having some kind of vision and some kind of plan that like, and I think fitness is kind of disposable. People think, because we live in the world of fat loss challenges and transformations and blah, blah, blah. But what about longevity? What about sustainability? And mobility is kind of at the base of that pyramid of looking at like how long can I do this for? Because if you look at someone who's uncomfortable in their own skin, you usually look at an ex-pro athlete who's just beating the shit, or you look at like a 75-year-old who just didn't treat their body well, and it's a struggle getting out of the chair. And I think that's, personally, that's like a frightening thing to me, because I've been so active and so mobile, or like movement is such a big part of my life. Like I can't imagine not having that. So taking for granted what you have now is really like, that's a bad way of going through life. Like, oh, it'll always be here. Well, not if you don't train for it correctly. Not if you don't plan for it correctly. So, and now I'm kind of like I'm not an old man. I used to feel like 5 years ago, I felt like we're in worse shape, and I felt older than what I do now. And I've totally, like we talked about before, like kind of like revamped the way I treat myself and I train myself. And those really fall around the categories of making sure my mobility work is done, making sure I'm in good cardiovascular health. Like those two things seem to be very important as you get older.
Sure.
So I'm just planning for the future.
So just to be clear, like mobility work, that's to a certain degree, it's kind of its own workout, really, on a daily basis. I mean, again, if you aren't squeezing it in between a lot of your training time, it doesn't hurt to think about this as kind of its own thing that you work on, that maybe at a separate time from your actual training sessions for the most part. And this is the maintenance, the maintaining of the high performance automobile that it'll take to continue to get in that race week to week for the duration.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, like, FRC isn't like, and I don't want to misrepresent what FRC really is, but it shouldn't be something that you have to do forever per se. Like if you can't squat because your hips aren't mobile enough, and you get to the point where you could, because of FRC or whatever else you're doing, gets you to the point where you can squat good, well, squatting is actually a really good mobility exercise. But most people don't have the hips or ankles or even shoulders to get into a good back squat position. So the best that you can get is suboptimal performance and probably some kind of injury or issue because of it. If you do it long enough, if you do it hard enough, you do a combination of both, there's going to be some kind of problem if you're not putting yourself in a good position. And that's pretty much fact. So it just makes sense to build this stuff into your program and account for it. Like if you're going to go to the gym 6 days a week, do it for 20 minutes before you work out. Do it for one day of the 6 days that you go to the gym, and that just becomes part of your routine. And then the hardest part is changing behaviors. If it's already part of the process when you're 25, it's going to be there for you when you're 35, 45. It's a lot harder to undo, a year or a decade of poor training and poor accountability on your end to make sure that you can do the things that you want to do.
But with FRC, ladies and gentlemen, you can undo that stuff.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
Yeah, not saying it's going to be easy. But the FRC is challenging. I always like to say it's not your grandfather's stretching. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a whole different type of thing. It requires a lot of energy and intensity. But if you're going to change structure that
Sure.
you've been either pulling one direction for a long time and now you're trying to undo it, it's going to require that type of effort. But as Mike is saying, and a lot of people will attest to around the country and around the world now with the FRC system, it's well worth the effort. That's for sure.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it really is. And you know what? It becomes, it's not fun, but I think people who like to be challenged will actually have some fulfillment out of it. Like there is an enjoyment, like getting better, right? Progression is fun. So if you couldn't touch your toes, and in a month from now you can touch your toes at will, that might be the victory that you need, not only to feel good about what you're doing, but to allow you to do the other things that you want to do or thought you wanted to do in the first place. So I think people can be set up for success in a lot of different ways. I don't think fitness and health and performance have to be exclusive to one another. I think they can all live under the same roof if you design the program appropriately. And again, like what do you want to do in 5, 10, 15 years from now? Like you don't have to compromise those beliefs because of what you think you should be doing now. But again, it just talks about, or it's all about talking to people that can help you or educate you on figuring out the best way of doing it. No different. If you want to retire at 55, you better talk to a great finance guy, and he'll figure out how to invest your time, your money, your energy. No different if you talk to a great trainer or coach and you say, hey, I want to still be able to do this when I'm 55. Then you have to make some, amendments to what you're doing to do the things you want to do. And that's fact, man. That's just life. So
sure, man.
We're health investors. That's all we are.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, hey, that's what it's all about, man. And like you said, you've been active. You can never imagine that. I've been a football player. My father, he got multiple sclerosis when I was a young kid. He was in a wheelchair for many years. So it's like that to me has always been a driving force behind wanting to stay as healthy as possible. Big reason why I got into this industry in the first place. It's like, man, when things go bad, no good. Like you don't want to see that, right? So just to kind of wrap this up, because I know you and we can pretty much go all day with this stuff, guys. I'm gonna put the FRC link for you to check out that place again. If you're feeling like, hey, like my body's banged up, I need to fix these things, or you want to continue to learn all the nuances on how you keep your body as a high performance machine for as long as possible. You check out that link, you go through it, you find a practitioner near you. If you're around Mike, I highly recommend you going to see Mike at Ranfone Training out in Connecticut, 100%. And FRC in itself, like it could be its own workout. It could literally be its own workout. It's aggressive, it's intense, and if you think, oh, stretching is that's not work. Ooh, it can be work, but it'll be work that'll be well worth it at the end of the day.
Well, have you taken a kin stretch class yet?
I did it a couple times when we did the cert. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something like I see this huge gravitation towards kin stretch from guys who've done or have a history in Pilates and yoga, and they're really seeing the benefit. And these are guys who've been yoga or practicing yoga or Pilates for years. And they're still seeing this as a missing link to what they've been doing. So, and that is in itself its own workout. Like, if you want to be humbled on a Saturday morning, go find some place that does a kin stretch class, and you'll get a workout. Like, you'll burn some calories. You'll feel like you've done something. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. So, and that's not a shameless plug in any way. I mean, I wouldn't be saying anything I don't fully endorse.
Sure.
We run kin stretch classes here a couple times a week, and we tell people like this, you need to do this. Like this is something that will help you so that you can get fat loss, so that you can get stronger, so you can get faster. Go do some of these classes and make sure that you're expressing the mobility and these other features of the human system that you should just have. So again, it's a way of changing behaviors or getting them into the routine, so that it becomes normal for them. So it allows a very sustainable avenue for those guys.
So if you think hot yoga is challenging and effective, try a kin stretch class. You'll never turn back again. You may not survive. You may not survive the session. I know I almost died a couple times trying to do it, but it's effective. It's challenging. It's like its own workout in itself. So if you haven't done it, check it out. Check it out at FRC. Mike, I'm going to let you get back to work over there. I know you got a lot of athletes to train at Ranfone's over there. Appreciate your time today, buddy. Again, you guys check out Mike. I'll put the link to his gym down here, and I'll put the FRC stuff out there as well.
Much appreciated.
Mike, appreciate it, bro.
All right, man.
Enjoy, buddy.
I'll talk to you.
Man. Thanks.